Most people think working from home is a dream. For me, it had slowly become a very quiet life. My name is Leo. I'm 26 years old, and I live alone in a small apartment on the third floor of an old building in the city. The apartment isn't huge, but it's comfortable. Clean white walls, a wide window that lets in the afternoon sun, a soft grey couch, and a desk that has slowly taken over half of my living room. That desk is where most of my life happens. 2 monitors glow in front of me almost every day. Emails, client messages, spreadsheets, design files, online meetings, my entire world fits inside those screens. I work remotely doing different online jobs, freelance projects, tech support, digital marketing work for small companies overseas. The money is good. Better than most people my age make. But sometimes I wonder if that's the only thing that's good. Most mornings start the same way. I wake up early, stretch for a few minutes beside my bed, and make coffee in my small kitchen. I'm in decent shape. I like working out at home and going for runs when the weather is nice. People have told me I'm attractive. Athletic build, dark hair, sharp jawline. But none of that really matters when you spend most of your days alone. After breakfast I sit at my desk, open my laptop, and the outside world disappears. Hours pass without me noticing. Sometimes I forget to eat lunch. Sometimes the sun goes down before I even realize the day is over. The strange thing is, I chose this life. No office drama. No long commutes. No annoying coworkers. Just me, my apartment, and my internet connection. Everything depends on that connection. My work. My income. My routine. My quiet little world. That morning had started like any other. I was in the middle of an important project for a client overseas. A marketing campaign that needed to be submitted before the end of the day. I leaned back in my chair, cracked my fingers, and refreshed the page on my screen. Nothing happened. The loading icon spun in a small endless circle. I frowned and refreshed again. Still nothing. A strange silence filled the room. No, come on, I muttered under my breath. I glanced at the router sitting on the shelf beside my desk. The little lights that normally blinked steadily were now frozen. One of them was red. Red was never a good sign. I stood up and walked over to it. Pressing the restart button like that would magically fix everything. The router blinked. Then went completely still. I waited. 30 seconds. A minute. 2 minutes. Still no connection. My chest tightened with frustration. Without internet, I couldn't upload my work, contact my clients, or even check my emails. It felt ridiculous that something so small could completely shut down my day. I ran a hand through my hair and sighed. Perfect timing, I said to the empty apartment. I tried a few things, resetting the router again, unplugging cables, checking settings on my laptop, but nothing worked. The internet was completely dead. For a moment I just stood there in the middle of my living room, staring at the useless blinking box. Then I remembered something. My neighbor down the hall was pretty friendly. We didn't talk much, but he always seemed to know people who could fix things around the building. Maybe he knew someone who understood this stuff better than I did. I grabbed my phone, slipped on my shoes, and stepped out of my apartment. The hallway was quiet as usual. I walked down to my neighbor's door and raised my hand. Then I knocked. The knock echoed softly through the hallway. For a moment nothing happened. Then I heard slow footsteps from inside the apartment. The door opened, and my neighbor looked at me with mild surprise. "Leo," he said. "Everything okay?" He was a middle-aged guy named Mr. Arthur. We weren't close, but he was the kind of neighbor who always nodded politely in the hallway and sometimes asked how work was going. "Yeah, sort of," I said with a small, awkward smile. "I actually needed a little help." He opened the door wider and leaned against the frame. "What's wrong?" "My internet completely died," I explained, rubbing the back of my neck. "I've tried restarting the router and checking the cables, but nothing's working. And I've got a project deadline today." Mr. Arthur let out a soft chuckle. "Ah, the modern world," he said. "No internet, no life." I laughed lightly, though he wasn't entirely wrong. I wish I knew more about fixing it, I admitted. But I'm more of a software guy. Hardware isn't really my thing. He nodded thoughtfully for a moment, then his expression brightened slightly. You know what? He said. I might know someone who can help. Really? I asked. Yeah. A friend of mine. Well, more like the son of an old friend. His name is Andrew. The name meant nothing to me yet, but I listened carefully. He's good with electronics, Mr. Arthur continued. Reuters, cables, repairs, all that stuff. He fixes things for people around the neighborhood sometimes. That sounds exactly like what I need, I said, relief creeping into my voice. Mr. Arthur nodded. He's a hard-working kid, he added. Life hasn't been easy for him, but he knows how to fix almost anything. I leaned slightly against the wall, curious now. What do you mean? Well, he said, lowering his voice a little as if sharing something personal. Andrew comes from a poor family. His parents are old, and he's been supporting them for years. I frowned slightly. How old is he? 25, I think, Mr. Arthur said. But he's been working since he was a teenager. That surprised me. Since he was a teenager? Yeah, around 15, if I remember right. He started doing small jobs, repair work, deliveries, construction, whatever he could find. I pictured someone older in my mind, but 25 was practically my age. He must be exhausted, I said quietly. Mr. Arthur shrugged. Life does that to some people. He paused for a moment, then added. But Andrew's a good kid. Tall guy, strong build, always looks a little rough around the edges because he works so much, but he's respectful. Honest. Something about the way he described him made me curious. Tall, strong, hardworking. A completely different life from mine. While I sat in my apartment all day working on laptops and marketing reports, this guy had been out in the world fixing things with his hands. Mr. Arthur pulled his phone out of his pocket. Let me call him, he said. You sure it's not too much trouble? I asked. He waved his hand dismissively. It's fine. He's always looking for work anyway. He scrolled through his contacts and tapped a number. The phone rang once. Then twice. I stood there quietly in the hallway, suddenly aware that in a few minutes, a complete stranger might be walking into my quiet little world. Mr. Arthur lifted the phone to his ear. Hello? Andrew? He said. He paused, listening. Yeah, it's Arthur. Listen, I've got a neighbor here whose Wi-Fi stopped working. Think you could come take a look? Another short pause. Then Mr. Arthur smiled. Good. I'll send you the address. He hung up and looked at me. He'll be here in about 20 minutes. I nodded slowly. For some reason, I had the strange feeling that something small had just started, and I had no idea it was about to change everything. I went back to my apartment and waited. The place felt strangely quiet again, but this time I kept glancing at the door every few minutes. My laptop sat useless on my desk, the frozen browser page still waiting for a connection that wasn't coming. 20 minutes suddenly felt longer than it should have. I made myself another cup of coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter, wondering what this Andrew guy would be like. From the way Mr. Cameron described him, he sounded older, maybe rough around the edges. Someone who had spent most of his life doing physical work instead of sitting behind screens. Someone very different from me. Just as I took a sip of coffee, there was a knock on the door. I set the mug down and walked over, opening it. The man standing outside was taller than I expected. He looked about my age, maybe a little younger, but his presence filled the doorway. Broad shoulders, strong arms, and a solid build that clearly came from years of hard work. He wore simple clothes. A slightly faded gray t-shirt and worn jeans, the kind you could tell had seen a lot of long days and dusty jobs. Nothing fancy, nothing stylish, but it suited him. His dark hair was slightly messy, and a few strands fell over his forehead. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes that caught my attention immediately. They looked tired. Not just from a long day. Tired in a deeper way. You Leo? He asked. His voice was low and steady. "Yeah," I said, stepping aside. "You must be Andrew." He nodded politely. "Mr. Cameron said your Wi-Fi stopped working." "Yeah, completely dead," I replied. "I've tried everything I know." Andrew stepped inside, glancing around the apartment for a moment. Not in a judgmental way, more like he was simply taking in the space. "Nice place," he said quietly. "Thanks," I replied. He walked over to the desk where the router sat and crouched down beside it without wasting any time. "Let's see what's going on." I leaned against the desk while he started checking the cables. Up close, I noticed something else about him. His hands. They were rough. The skin slightly worn and scratched, like someone who worked with tools every day. Small scars here and there, faint lines across his knuckles. Hands that had clearly fixed a lot of things. Andrew unplugged one of the cables and examined it carefully. "Did the internet stop suddenly?" he asked. "Yeah. I was working and the page just froze." He nodded. "Probably a connection issue." He reached his hand up slightly. "Can you pass me that cable?" I grabbed the cable from the desk and handed it down to him. As he took it, our fingers brushed. It was a small moment. Barely anything. But both of us paused. Just for a second. I wasn't even sure why. His hand was warm, and his grip was firm. For some strange reason, I suddenly became aware of how close we were standing. Andrew cleared his throat slightly and turned back to the router. "Thanks," he said. I stepped back a little, trying to ignore the weird feeling that had just passed through me. He continued working, opening the router case and checking the inside carefully. "You've done this before?" I asked. Andrew chuckled softly. "More times than I can count." "How long have you been fixing electronics?" He shrugged slightly while adjusting a small wire. "Since I was a teenager." "Really?" "Yeah. Around 15. I blinked in surprise. 15. Andrew nodded. "My dad used to repair radios and old TVs. I started helping him when I was young. Eventually I learned how everything works." He tightened a screw and continued speaking casually. "After a while people in the neighborhood started asking me to fix their stuff. Reuters, computers, phones, whatever they had." "That's impressive," I said. He shrugged again. "Just practice." There was no pride in his voice. Just simple honesty. I watched him for a moment, noticing how focused he was. The way his strong hands moved carefully with the small tools, how patient he seemed while checking every connection. It struck me that our lives had gone in completely different directions. At 15, I had been worried about exams and video games. At 15, Andrew had already been working. "Try the internet now," he said suddenly. I turned back to my laptop and refreshed the page. The loading icon spun for a second. Then the website appeared instantly. My eyes widened. "It's working." Andrew stood up slowly, wiping his hands on his jeans. "Just a loose connection inside the router," he explained. "Should be fine now." Relief washed over me. "You have no idea how much you just saved my day." He smiled slightly. A quiet, modest smile. "No problem." As I looked at him standing there in my living room, something settled in my chest. I suddenly realized something very clear. My life had been comfortable, easy, but Andrew's life had clearly been much harder than mine. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The feeling I had buried for weeks, the quiet thrill I'd felt when Andrew relied on me, when he needed me, when my apartment became his safe place, wasn't entirely pure. One evening, after we finished a long day of repairs and quiet conversation, I sat down beside him on the couch. The room was dimly lit, the soft hum of my computer filling the background. "Andrew," I said slowly, my voice heavy, "I need to tell you something." He looked at me, curious, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I've been thinking about us," I continued, swallowing hard. "Anne, I have to be honest. Part of the reason I've liked having you around is because I liked having a little power over the situation, over you." His smile faltered. "Power?" he repeated softly. "Yes," I admitted. I realized I enjoyed knowing that you depended on me. That my place, my time, my decisions mattered to you in a way they didn't matter to anyone else. And I didn't like that about myself. Andrew looked down for a long moment, his hands resting on his knees. I'm hurt, he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. I trusted you. And part of me thought, maybe you just liked me for who I am. I reached out, taking his hand in mine. I do, Andrew. I like you. Not because you need me. Not because you can't leave. Because you are you. He looked up at me, and I could see the honesty in his eyes. You need to know something too, he said softly. I didn't stay because of money. I stayed because I love you, Leo. Even when I wasn't sure if you'd treat me fairly. Even when I felt unsure about everything. I felt my chest tighten. The weight of his words was more than I expected. You stayed because of love, I repeated quietly, letting the words sink in. Not money. Not convenience. Not safety. Love. He nodded, and a small, tentative smile returned to his lips. I wanted to be honest with you, he said, even if it hurts. And it did hurt. But it also cleared a path forward. I promise you this, I said firmly, squeezing his hand. From now on, I will support you. I will care for you. I will love you. But I will never use my position to control you. Never again. We'll be equals, Andrew. Always. He leaned slightly closer, resting his head on my shoulder. Thank you, Leo. That means everything. We stayed like that for a long time, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside. For the first time, I felt that our bond wasn't about need, or comfort, or subtle control. It was about choice, about honesty, about love that was mutual. Months passed. Slowly, steadily, life began to settle into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Andrew's repair work flourished. With my help setting up online profiles and guiding him through better opportunities, he found clients who valued his skill and experience. His confidence grew, and with it, our relationship deepened, not through dependence, but through shared trust and affection. We moved in together, combining our routines and living spaces without fear or imbalance. I learned to appreciate the quiet laughter he brought to the apartment, the way he cleaned up after a long day of work without complaint, the soft warmth of his hand in mine as we sat together in the evenings. And he, Andrew, grew stronger, not just in work, but in heart. We were equals, partners, friends, lovers. And I knew then, truly, that love was never about control. It was about connection. The day my Wi-Fi broke, my life finally connected to someone real. When Andrew finished his tea, he placed the mug gently on the counter and glanced toward the door. I should probably get going, he said. Still have a couple things to do today. For some reason, the idea of him leaving so quickly didn't sit well with me. The apartment had felt different since he arrived. Less quiet, less empty. I couldn't quite explain it, but I didn't want the moment to end yet. Before I could overthink it, the words slipped out. Do you want to stay for dinner? Andrew blinked, clearly surprised. Dinner? Yeah, I said, trying to sound casual. It's the least I can do after you saved my internet and my job today. He hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck slightly. I don't want to bother you, he said. You wouldn't be bothering me, I replied quickly. Honestly, I was just going to cook something simple anyway. That wasn't entirely true. Most nights I just ordered food online or made something quick and boring. But tonight suddenly felt different. Andrew looked unsure for a moment. Then he nodded slowly. Okay, he said. I can stay for a bit. A small wave of relief passed through me. Great, I said, moving toward the kitchen. Let's see what I have. The kitchen wasn't fancy, but it had everything I needed. I opened the refrigerator and pulled out a few ingredients: pasta, vegetables, some chicken, and a couple of sauces. Hope you like pasta, I said. Andrew chuckled lightly. I like anything that's food. I laughed. Fair enough. At first I expected him to sit at the counter while I cooked, but instead he rolled up the sleeves of his shirt slightly and stepped beside me. "What can I help with?" he asked. "You don't have to." "It's fine," he said with a small smile. "I'm used to helping in the kitchen." So we started cooking together. I chopped vegetables while Andrew handled the pan. He moved with an easy confidence, like someone who had done this many times before. "Careful," he said at one point as I tried to flip something in the pan. I flipped it too early. The piece of chicken slid halfway out and nearly landed on the stove. Andrew caught it just in time with the spatula. We both froze for a second. Then he laughed. A real laugh this time, warm and relaxed. "Okay," he said, shaking his head slightly. "Maybe I should handle the cooking part." "Hey," I protested. "I'm trying." "Trying is good," he replied with a grin. Soon the small kitchen filled with the smell of food and the sound of quiet conversation. For the first time that day, Andrew looked less tired. His shoulders weren't as tense, and his voice carried a lighter tone. Maybe he just needed a moment to breathe. At one point we both reached for the same spice container at the same time. Our shoulders brushed lightly. Neither of us moved immediately. It was a small contact, barely noticeable, but it sent a strange warmth through my chest. Andrew cleared his throat softly and stepped slightly to the side. "Sorry," he said. "It's fine," I replied. We finished cooking a few minutes later and carried the plates to the living room. Dinner was simple but surprisingly good. We talked about small things, work, the city, random stories from Andrew's repair jobs. Some of them were funny enough to make both of us laugh. After we finished eating, I turned on the TV. "Movie," I suggested. Andrew nodded. We sat on the couch together, not too close but not far apart either. The movie played quietly in the background while the evening slowly settled around us. At some point during the second half of the movie, I noticed Andrew had gone quiet. I glanced over. His head had tilted slightly to the side, and his eyes were closed. He had fallen asleep. For a moment I just sat there, watching him. Without the tired focus he usually carried, his face looked calmer, younger somehow. The day must have been exhausting for him. Carefully, I stood up and grabbed a soft blanket from the chair nearby. I draped it gently over him so I wouldn't wake him. He shifted slightly but didn't open his eyes. I sat back down on the couch, the movie still playing softly on the screen. But my attention wasn't on the TV anymore. Instead, my thoughts kept drifting toward the man sleeping beside me. The apartment didn't feel empty tonight. And as I sat there in the quiet glow of the television, one thought slowly settled into my mind. I didn't want Andrew to leave. Morning light slowly filled the living room. I woke up earlier than usual, the quiet hum of my computer still running on the desk across the room. For a moment I forgot Andrew was there. Then I glanced at the couch. He was still asleep. The blanket I had placed over him during the night had slipped slightly to the side, and one of his arms rested loosely across his chest. In the soft morning light, he looked calmer than he had the day before. Less tense. Less tired. I quietly walked into the kitchen and made coffee, trying not to make too much noise. The smell slowly filled the apartment. A few minutes later I heard movement behind me. Andrew sat up on the couch, rubbing his eyes slightly as he adjusted to the light. "Morning," I said. He blinked a few times before focusing on me. "Oh, right," he said, suddenly remembering where he was. "Sorry," he added quickly. "I didn't mean to fall asleep like that." I smiled and handed him a mug of coffee. "You were exhausted. It's not a crime." He took the mug, holding it carefully with both hands. "Thanks." For a few minutes we sat quietly, drinking coffee while the morning sunlight spread across the apartment floor. Eventually Andrew stood up. "I should get going," he said. "Got a couple repair calls today." I nodded slowly, though a small part of me felt disappointed. The apartment would go back to being quiet again. Before he reached the door, I spoke. "Andrew." He turned back toward me. "Yeah." I hesitated for a moment before asking, "Do you need more work?" His expression shifted slightly, like the question wasn't surprising. I always need work, he said honestly. There was no embarrassment in his voice. Just simple truth. I take whatever jobs I can find. I leaned back slightly against the kitchen counter, thinking. You're good with electronics, I said. Better than I am, honestly. Andrew shrugged. I've had a lot of practice. That's exactly my point. He looked at me curiously. What do you mean? Well, I continued, I deal with computers and online systems all the time for my work. But when something breaks physically, routers, cables, hardware, I usually have no idea what I'm doing. Andrew listened quietly. So I was thinking, I said slowly, what if you helped me sometimes? He frowned slightly. Help you how? Whenever something technical breaks here, I explained. Or if I need hardware repairs for some of my work equipment. Andrew seemed to consider that for a moment. That could work, he said. But I wasn't finished. And, I added, if you're working nearby, you could stay here sometimes. His eyebrows lifted slightly. Stay here? Yeah, I said. I've got the space. The couch is comfortable, and honestly, I'm usually here working anyway. He looked around the apartment for a moment. You don't have to do that, he said. I know, I replied. I paused briefly before adding, but it might make things easier for both of us. Andrew stood quietly, thinking it over. I could almost see the calculations happening in his mind. Work hours, transportation, money, the constant pressure of trying to survive another week. Finally, he nodded. Okay, he said. Yeah. Yeah. His voice was simple, practical. If there's work, I'll help. There it was again. That quiet honesty. But as I watched him standing there in my apartment, another thought crept slowly into the back of my mind. Andrew needed money. And I had it. It created a strange imbalance between us. One I hadn't noticed before. A small sense of power I wasn't sure how to feel about. Was I helping him? Or giving him a reason to stay close to me? Andrew finished his coffee and placed the mug gently in the sink. Then he turned toward me again. A small smile appeared on his face. Thank you, he said. There was genuine gratitude in his voice. Really? You're helping me a lot. He hesitated slightly before adding, you're really kind. The words hung quietly in the air between us. I watched him for a moment. Then I gave a small nod. But inside my mind, a different thought lingered. I wasn't entirely sure that kindness was the real reason behind my offer. After that morning, Andrew started coming over more often. At first it was just once or twice a week. Small repair jobs. A router that needed adjusting, a loose cable in one of my backup computers, a broken keyboard that he somehow managed to revive with a screwdriver and patience. But slowly, those visits became part of a routine. Some afternoons I would hear a knock on my door and already know it was him. Andrew never arrived empty-handed. Sometimes it was a toolbox. Sometimes spare cables or parts he thought I might need. Once he brought an old router just to show me how it worked on the inside. You should learn this stuff, he told me while opening the device carefully on the kitchen table. I already have you for that, I joked. He shook his head with a faint smile. No. What if I'm not around one day? Something about the way he said that made me pause. Still, I leaned closer as he pointed at the tiny components inside. This is the board, he explained. Most problems start here. Loose connection, damaged chip, overheated parts. His hands moved confidently, explaining each piece like someone who had spent years learning through trial and error. I realized he was a natural teacher. Okay, I said after a few minutes. Now it looks less like alien technology. Andrew laughed softly. You're learning. Sometimes our work sessions turned into long evenings. After fixing whatever needed attention, we would end up sitting in the living room with simple food between us. Pasta again. Fried rice. Cheap takeout when neither of us felt like cooking. Late-night meals slowly became normal. One night Andrew glanced at the clock and frowned. Wow, it's almost midnight. Time moves faster when you're fixing my disasters, I replied. He smirked slightly. Your disasters aren't that bad. Another night, we ended up playing a video game together. It started when Andrew noticed the console near my TV. You play? He asked. Sometimes. He picked up the controller curiously. Never had time for this stuff growing up. So I turned the system on. What started as just one game turned into hours of competition and laughter. Andrew turned out to be surprisingly competitive. You cheated, he said once after losing a round. I absolutely did not. You definitely did. You're just mad you lost. He laughed then, leaning back against the couch. That sound, the relaxed, genuine laugh, was becoming more familiar. And somehow, important to me. Over the next few weeks our routines blended together naturally. Andrew showed me how to fix simple hardware problems. How to check connections, replace small parts, and diagnose issues without immediately panicking. In return, I helped him with something he had always struggled with. The internet. Not using it, but using it well. One evening we sat side by side at my desk while I opened several job websites. You could get better repair work through here, I told him. Andrew leaned forward slightly, studying the screen. People actually hire through these sites. All the time, I said. You just need a profile. So we spent an hour setting one up. Name, skills, experience. Andrew hesitated when it came to describing his background. I didn't finish school, he said quietly. That doesn't matter here, I replied. Your experience speaks for itself. I typed while he dictated the repairs he had done over the years. Phones, Reuters, computers, appliances. The list kept growing. You've done more than half the technicians on this site, I said. Andrew chuckled softly. Never thought of it that way. Weeks passed. The more time we spent together, the more comfortable everything felt. Then one night the weather changed. A storm rolled into the city without warning. Heavy rain struck the windows, and thunder echoed through the building. Andrew had come by that evening to help install a new router system for one of my work clients. By the time we finished, the storm outside had become intense. Lightning flashed across the room through the window. Andrew stood near the balcony, watching the rain. You okay? I asked. Yeah, he said quietly, but his voice sounded thoughtful. What's on your mind? I asked. He hesitated before answering. I was just thinking. It's strange. What is? Andrew glanced around the apartment. This place. I frowned slightly. What about it? He shrugged. I feel calm here. The rain continued tapping steadily against the glass. Andrew kept speaking slowly. My house is always noisy. Bills, problems, neighbors arguing, repairs that never end. He rubbed the back of his neck. But here it's quiet. I stepped closer beside him. You're always welcome here, I said. Andrew looked down slightly before adding something softer. I feel safe here. The words caught me off guard. Safe. Something about hearing that made my chest tighten. Without thinking too much, I placed my hand gently on his shoulder. It was a simple gesture. Just reassurance. Andrew didn't move away. Instead, he stayed exactly where he was, standing beside me while the storm rumbled outside. For a moment neither of us spoke, but the silence between us felt warmer than it had before. And I realized something quietly. Andrew wasn't just visiting my apartment anymore. He was slowly becoming part of my life. By the time the storm passed that night, the city outside had grown quiet again. The rain had slowed to a soft drizzle, and the occasional flash of lightning had faded into distant rumbling. Inside my apartment, the lights were dim, and the TV played quietly in the background. Andrew and I sat on the couch like we had many times before. But something felt different. We were closer than usual, our shoulders nearly touching. Neither of us seemed to move away. The movie on the screen had already been playing for a while, but I couldn't tell you what it was about. My attention kept drifting toward the person sitting beside me. Andrew leaned forward slightly, resting his elbows on his knees. I got a message today, he said. Oh! I turned toward him. From that repair website you helped me set up. My eyebrows lifted. Really? Already? He nodded, a small smile forming. Someone wants me to fix their office routers next week. That's great, I said, genuinely excited. Yeah, he replied quietly. I probably wouldn't have found it without your help. He looked down at his hands for a moment before continuing. You've done a lot for me, Leo. I shook my head lightly. You're the one who fixed half the things in my apartment. Andrew chuckled softly. That's different. How? He thought for a moment before answering. You believed I could do more. The sincerity in his voice made something shift inside my chest. You deserve more, I said. Andrew glanced up at me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. It felt heavy. Andrew finally spoke again, his voice softer. Thank you. I looked at him curiously. For what? For letting me be here, he said. For helping me find better work. For treating me like I matter. His words caught me off guard. I leaned back slightly, studying his expression. You do matter, I said quietly. Andrew looked away for a moment, clearly not used to hearing something like that. Then he said something that surprised me. You changed my life, Leo. I felt a small smile form. You changed mine too. He looked back at me. Really? Yeah. I hesitated before explaining. My life was quiet before you started coming here. Quiet isn't always bad. No, I said. But sometimes it's lonely. Andrew's expression softened slightly. Before I fully realized what was happening, he leaned forward and wrapped his arms around me. It was sudden, but gentle. A tight hug. For a second I froze. Then I hugged him back. Andrew was warm, solid, real. Neither of us pulled away right away. The moment stretched longer than either of us expected. Slowly, he leaned back just enough to look at me. We were very close now. Closer than we had ever been before. I could see the hesitation in his eyes. And something else too. My heart started beating faster. Andrew didn't move away. Neither did I. Our faces slowly drifted closer. For a brief moment, time felt like it had paused. Then our lips met. The kiss was soft, careful, almost uncertain. But it felt real. When we pulled back, both of us looked slightly stunned. Andrew let out a nervous laugh. Well, that happened. I couldn't help smiling. Yeah, I said quietly. There was a brief moment of awkward silence. Then Andrew rubbed the back of his neck. Sorry if that was. I shook my head quickly. Don't apologize. He studied my face for a moment, as if making sure I meant it. Then he relaxed slightly. A quiet happiness settled between us. That night Andrew stayed. Not on the couch this time. We talked for a long time. About random things. About the future. About nothing important at all. Eventually the conversation faded into comfortable silence. We fell asleep beside each other. And for the first time in a long while, my apartment didn't feel empty at all. The days after our first kiss felt strange. Andrew started coming over more frequently, staying later into the evenings. He helped with repairs, we cooked together, played games, and sometimes just sat quietly in the apartment while I worked on my projects. It was comfortable, easy. Somehow, it felt like we had created our own little world. And yet, the more time we spent together, the more a small, troubling thought kept creeping into my mind. I realized I liked it. Liked having him depend on me. Not just the repairs. Not just the meals. But the quiet trust in his eyes. The way he looked to me for advice, for comfort. The way he stayed, night after night, when his own apartment and responsibilities were waiting for him. Was I really helping Andrew? Or was I enjoying the fact that he couldn't leave so easily? I tried to push the thought away, but it lingered like a shadow. It made me feel guilty. One night, we were sitting on the couch together, the city lights spilling through the window. Rain had started again, tapping softly against the glass. Andrew leaned slightly against me as we watched an old movie. His head brushed my shoulder, his eyes relaxed. "You know," he said quietly, his voice softer than usual, "you're the first person who ever cared about me." I felt the words like a weight pressing into my chest. I froze for a moment, staring straight ahead. He trusted me completely. No walls, no doubt. Just him, placing himself in my hands. I swallowed hard, guilt twisting in my stomach. I had never thought of myself as manipulative. I had never intended to use him. And yet, here I was, benefiting from the fact that he needed me. That my comfort and my apartment had become a safe space he relied on. I looked down at him, his face soft in the dim light. The honesty in his words tore at me. "Andrew," I started, unsure how to continue. He turned slightly to meet my gaze, waiting. I like that you trust me," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I have to be honest with myself too. I've realized something." He tilted his head, curious but calm. "I enjoy having you here. More than I probably should." He blinked, waiting for me to continue. "I like that you depend on me," I said, my chest tightening. "And that scares me. Because I don't want to be the reason you can't leave. I don't want to be a cage." Andrew's expression softened. He didn't look angry. He didn't look hurt, at least, not visibly. But there was a subtle tension in his shoulders, as if he understood what I was admitting without me needing to finish. "I never want to trap you, Andrew," I continued. I want you to stay because you want to, not because you need to survive." He stayed quiet for a moment, his eyes fixed on mine. Then he leaned a little closer. "I know," he said softly. "I trust you. I stay because I like being here. Because I feel safe. Because I like you, Leo." Hearing him say that made my throat tighten. I wanted to reach out, hold him, reassure him. And yet I also felt the weight of responsibility pressing down. This wasn't just about desire. This wasn't just about comfort. This was about trust, about the fragile bond we had built together. I realized in that moment that love shouldn't be a cage. It shouldn't be about control or power. It should be about choice. About freedom. I reached out slowly and placed my hand on his. "Then I'll do better," I said. "I'll make sure you're always free, Andrew. I'll never use your trust as a chain. Love isn't supposed to hold someone captive." He squeezed my hand gently, a quiet affirmation. And for the first time, I felt clarity. I didn't want him because he needed me. I wanted him because he chose to be with me. Because that choice was real. Because love should never be a cage. I couldn't ignore it any longer. The feeling I had buried for weeks, the quiet thrill I'd felt when Andrew relied on me, when he needed me, when my apartment became his safe place, wasn't entirely pure. One evening, after we finished a long day of repairs and quiet conversation, I sat down beside him on the couch. The room was dimly lit, the soft hum of my computer filling the background. "Andrew," I said slowly, my voice heavy, "I need to tell you something." He looked at me, curious, a faint smile playing on his lips. "I've been thinking about us," I continued, swallowing hard. "And I have to be honest. Part of the reason I've liked having you around is because I liked having a little power. Over the situation. Over you." His smile faltered. "Power?" he repeated softly. "Yes," I admitted. "I realized I enjoyed knowing that you depended on me. That my place, my time, my decisions mattered to you in a way they didn't matter to anyone else. And I didn't like that about myself." Andrew looked down for a long moment, his hands resting on his knees. I'm hurt," he said finally, his voice quiet but steady. "I trusted you. And part of me thought, maybe you just liked me for who I am." I reached out, taking his hand in mine. "I do, Andrew. I like you. Not because you need me. Not because you can't leave. Because you are you." He looked up at me, and I could see the honesty in his eyes. "You need to know something too," he said softly. "I didn't stay because of money. I stayed Because I love you, Leo. Even when I wasn't sure if you'd treat me fairly. Even when I felt unsure about everything. I felt my chest tighten. The weight of his words was more than I expected. You stayed because of love, I repeated quietly, letting the words sink in. Not money. Not convenience. Not safety. Love. He nodded, and a small, tentative smile returned to his lips. I wanted to be honest with you, he said, even if it hurts. And it did hurt. But it also cleared a path forward. I promise you this, I said firmly, squeezing his hand. From now on, I will support you. I will care for you. I will love you. But I will never use my position to control you. Never again. We'll be equals, Andrew. Always. He leaned slightly closer, resting his head on my shoulder. Thank you, Leo. That means everything. We stayed like that for a long time, the room quiet except for the soft hum of the city outside. For the first time, I felt that our bond wasn't about need, or comfort, or subtle control. It was about choice, about honesty, about love that was mutual. Months passed. Slowly, steadily, life began to settle into a rhythm that felt natural and right. Andrew's repair work flourished. With my help setting up online profiles and guiding him through better opportunities, he found clients who valued his skill and experience. His confidence grew, and with it, our relationship deepened, not through dependence, but through shared trust and affection. We moved in together, combining our routines and living spaces without fear or imbalance. I learned to appreciate the quiet laughter he brought to the apartment, the way he cleaned up after a long day of work without complaint, the soft warmth of his hand in mine as we sat together in the evenings. And he, Andrew, grew stronger, not just in work, but in heart. We were equals, partners, friends, lovers. And I knew then, truly, that love was never about control. It was about connection. The day my Wi-Fi broke, my life finally connected to someone real.